Welcome to the second video about Identity Manager and Angular web development. In this video, I want to show you how to prepare a Windows Workstation with all the tools that are needed just to start with your Angular web development. This is part 2 of the story, and in part 3 of the story, I will show you exactly the same but on a Linux desktop. The reason for is that Angular web development can be done on different platforms. It could be a Mac, it could be a Linux, it could be Windows, but I think Windows should be the first because Windows will be more or less the workstation typically people will choose. Have fun with that video and follow me now. Well, we are just connected to our admin workstation. This is a Windows 10 workstation and a part of our training environment. And what I like to do here is to install all the tools and prerequisites we talked about. A little bit different to what we talked about before. I like to use just a very specific software to install and deinstall my software packages. We was talking about websites and the download option on these websites to get software. I'm using a Windows repository. For people who don't know what I'm talking about, there is a project available that is called Chocolate. And that very specific project, you can see it here, allows me just to install, like a Linux, software from a repository. This is because it is easier for me to maintain my environments. The only thing I have to do is to update with one command all my packages from time to time, and I have not to visit websites and download software and such, or count on update functionality implemented. However, if you are interested in this, this is the site with getting started. You get it installed, and if you are interested what packages are available, then you can find that here underneath of packages with the disclaimer. You will then see here many packages. Best way is to search for a specific software and seeing all of these packages. Then you are able to select one, and here directly right beside there is always then the command that will install these specific packages. That said, what I will do is I open a PowerShell in admin mode to be able to install software. And now let's install our software. First piece, of course, is our Visual Studio Code. So I will just show you first all install packages, of course. These are my currently local install packages. As you can easily see, there's a Visual Studio, but not a Visual Studio Code or a code right here. There is no Postman. There is, of course, no Git and all of these things. Just to get it, I will now directly install all of that software. So let's directly start. First, we install Visual Studio Code. Therefore, I have to know what the package name is. I can figure it out from the repository. You saw it, Joko install Visual Studio Code. That is the way to get code. We need to install Git, of course. Because Git is changing system variables, it's not necessary just to run such that is called refresh environment. That is just to get the system variables again. And after this is done, then I can directly start to install my Postman. So, and the really last bit to install, it's my Angular. You can, by the way, in the meantime, see on the left-hand side the icons to my installed software. But to install Angular, as we all know, we need Node. In this very specific case, I'm not quite sure what version in Chocolate I want to install, and so I just search for that specific package and figure out what exists. Many of them. Let's start at the begin. So one node, no, node is more or less what I'm searching for. And I think it was just wrongly listed. It has to be node. So, and here we are, node, there we are. WebKit, no, we need 17, that is one version. There's the LTS. Yeah, we remember we talked about the LTS, so this one is the one I want to install. So Joko install and no, the LTS version. So having that said, last thing what I need is of course something where I can develop my software. And to install my software, what I need to do is I need somewhere a folder, a root folder where my development packages and my development projects will reside. And therefore I just switch here to the documents folder. And in the documents folder, we will just create one. Angular web development. So that should be there. Here we are. So I can directly jump into that specific folder. And now I need to create, I like to say, a repository so that all my changes can then be added to a repository. There are many ways to do that. One is to clone an existing repository like we do it, for example, for the Identity Manager web front. Then we clone it directly from the internet. In our specific case, we start with a local repository. That is the typical way for smaller development engagements. You start with a local repository and later on you will load that up, for example, to GitHub or one of these other Git servers. So to do so, what I will do here is I will first look for Git if it's available. It's not, so I try if I can with refresh env get it available. So that means my system not really recognizes Git. Many ways to handle that. One way, of course, is after installing Git just to reboot the machine. And that is exactly what I will do. So after my machine is already rebooted, I just navigated back to the folder. And this time, because it is already rebooted, here I can directly call Git. You see there is Git available. Before I can use Git, or let me say it that way, before I can start to commit stuff into Git, it is necessary to set two variables. And if you don't deal with different accounts to different repositories, it is a good idea just to add them globally to your system. So let's use git config to write these variables. I'm doing that globally, therefore I need here the switch global, and then I can start with user.name. This is variable number 1 I have to add, and then I enter my name. Of course you will enter your name, and if this is just set, then I need to do the same, which is necessary with the email address you want to use, and you can easily do that here. So, and now Git is ready to use. For people which are dealing with different repositories and different accounts used in these repositories, then you will just, instead of using the global switch, which is global for all repositories on your machine, using, for example, the local switch. If you do so, then this configuration is only valid for your local repository, and for another repository, you can just use another variable. Having that set, the next thing here in my Angular development is just to create the repository where I will store the changes to. Therefore, I will use git init and will automatically get a repository. And that is, by the way, quite easy to find. We go here to the browser, we show into the documents folder, there's Angular web development, you can see it. You see a green check there that says it is under protection of my Git. And if I look into that, you see a Git folder. That is the hint that this and all subfolders are under Git protection. This is my repository. The rest is my workspace. That means my workspace is already empty. Wonderful. To see that, you can as well, for example, if you are interested, look in a Git status. And if you look into the Git status, then the system will say no branches, no commits, nothing yet. And of course, the next Git steps we will then do with Visual Studio Code, so that you have not to use the command line. But for all people who are interested in the command line, please use that command line. If you are really interested in a more colored command line just for Git, you can right click here into that specific directory and say git bash from here. And if you do so, then you get a colored git bash, which I like to say nicely will show you all necessary for Git. The only problem here is that you need to know all of these Git command, or at the end, be able to look into the Git help. However, we are using front ends. For now, that should be enough. I close all the windows. Installation, it's already done. We have Postman, Visual Studio Code. We have Node.js. We have NPM, the package manager, came together with Node.js. And we have installed Git. We have created a development folder and made it available in Git. And the next steps can be done in Visual Studio Code. So our really last step here is in the directory where we are, just to open code, and so that code automatically jumps to that specific folder. I just put a period behind the code command, and with that I get open Visual Studio Code. Here we are. I think we have a good view in that. As you can see, my Angular web development folder is already empty. You can as well see my source control says there is nothing available. And the first thing we will do is to install all necessary plugins we need or we like to install for our first Angular baby steps. Therefore, I just step to the plugin section. In the plugin section, I just search for Angular. As you can see, many plugins available. Yeah, here, a lot of them. Whatever else you want to install, it's up to you. It makes typically not any sense to install all of them because some of them have the same functionality. And then Visual Studio Code will start to fight. For our first baby steps, I will install the Angular language service. That is necessary to get syntax highlighting and all stuff around Angular that helps me a little bit coding. I will as well install the Angular snippets. That is to write a little bit faster code by just adding here some functions and get a code snippet for it. And what I need additionally to that is something our developers came up with and say, hey, the NX console is a very nice thing because the NX console allows to make the Angular commands a little bit more visible in Studio. You can see that here. If I switch to the NX console here, there are then specific commands we typically enter in the command line, but for the parameters we get here then a wonderful form which allows us to configure everything properly. So I will install NX commands as well. And because creating such projects in Angular is HTML and CSS, I need some HTML and CSS plugins as well. So let's look for the HTML CSS support. And there is the HTML CSS support. I will install that specific plugin. And because that is not formatting CSS documents, I will as well install the so-named CSS formatter. Which plugins you at the end like to install is 100% up to you. It is your choice. There are hundreds of plugins available. This is a set where you can perfectly live with for the first tries and errors. And later on, you will then install the one or the other more if necessary. Having that said, we are nearly at the end of our primary installation of our Angular development system. We are stepping back. We don't have any projects here. We just step to the terminal, enter new terminal. This is our new terminal we want to use. I will as well minimize a little bit here the section. I don't need so much space. And I like to say two things are left. First, I have to create a new Angular project, but before I can create that project, I need, of course, the Angular client tools. And to get them, I use the install package manager, just to let you see that everything is installed. We have installed Node. It's there in version 16. We have installed the NPM package manager in version 8.5.5. And now we have to install Angular and client packages. And therefore, I install just with the package manager the Angular client. Need to be a slash there. NPM install G and then Angular client tools. And doing so, the system automatically is just installing the package. If you don't start your code from the PowerShell like I did, your code will run, I like to say here, in a user mode. Yeah, you see code is now running as an administrator, and that allows me here directly to install these packages. If you don't want to start as an administrator, what you can easily do is to use then the PowerShell administrator command to run exactly the same line, npm install Angular. If you don't are an administrator, there could be error messages during the installation, so please be careful. So that means Angular is prepared. Last step here is to start or to create a new project. So again, the Angular command, a new project name. Later on, we will implement an identity management. So here we are. Angular will just create that management. You will see it then directly here in that folder. First, some questions to answer. First question is about the Angular routing. That's necessary if you have a lot of modules and they are communicating with each other. Then you can check that. I don't need it for my first project. I have to select which type of cascading style sheets I want to use. I will use standard cascading style sheets. And now you can see here on the left-hand side that my Angular project gets generated. Lots of packages, smaller packages just to copy. And about a minute or so later, you see that is already completely created. My complete Angular project is available. And to make it visible, I will directly start it. Therefore, I have just to run the project, which is Angular, and then serve. And I will as well open a browser so that you can see the project. And if I do so, what you will see here is a red error message that says there is no Angular project available, which is absolutely right, because my project, as you can easily see, it's in a subfolder here, which is called identity management. So I will just enter to the identity management folder. Here we are. Run then the same command again, ng serve open. And what happens now is that my project gets compiled. It gets hot compiled. That means the compiler will keep running. And I will then see a browser that shows me the first overview. And of course, if you can see such or a similar site, then you are good, because that is a running Angular project, could now be further developed. And in some seconds, we will start with that as well. Last but not least, in the meantime, if I switch here to the source control view, then you see there are a lot of changes. And the reason for all these lot of changes is that this is my new Angular project I already created, and that needs now to be entered into my Git repository. Many ways to do that. One possible way is just to here switch to the console and create another console. Now we have two of them. That is the one where the Angular project runs into. This here is another console in the same folder. And for example, I can now look with git status on the specific git information. And as you can see, that system tells me here that the complete folder needs to be added. Yeah, I like to say this here is a little bit better for our purpose. And to get it done, what I will do is the following. I will just select all of these files in there. And then I will press here on the stage button. Remember, Git, it's a repository. It works in a way that only staged files gets handled. That means you can have new files or updated files you don't want to handle with your commits. Commit means to store it into the repository. In our very specific case, all of the new files are of interest. So I just select all of them, hit on one of these buttons. Now all of them are in the staged folder. None of them are in the changed folder, which means all of my changes are in the staged folder. And the last thing I have to do is I have to commit my changes, and therefore I need always a message. So I enter into these files into my repository and say, this is the initial installation of a new Angular project. So, and with that, every changes are committed to the repository. Yeah, you can see that here, there's nothing left. You can as well see that here with another git status, there's nothing in there. And I can now start changing again my project. That is exactly what we will do in the next steps. But for now, you see we have a running project and we have already stored our initial phase. That means our initial installation of an empty Angular project here in our Git repository.